I discovered my husband of several decades had been having an affair. The other woman is a young lady, just 20 years old, much younger than me. When I confronted, my husband coldly said to me, "Divorce me for her. You can have custody of the kids." My world turned black, words failing me. Moreover, he had gotten his mistress pregnant. I told our daughters about the situation. Embracing a suggestion from them, I decided to take drastic measures. Just you wait, I'll give you back soon. My name is Natalie Johnson, 47 years old. I married John, who was the same age when I was 25, and in the blink of an eye, 20 years had passed. We have 3 daughters, the oldest in college, the second and third in high school. They're not fully independent yet, but they're at an age when they can manage things on their own. Now that the children were less dependent, I was able to immerse myself in the work which I love. I've been working for a major corporation since before I was married, and I make more money than my husband. Furthermore, the house we live in was inherited from my parents. We have no mortgage payments, allowing us to live comfortably. With the kids growing up, we had more time as a couple. One night, while we were having a beer together, my husband started speaking with a grin. "Hey Natalie, the kids aren't as dependent on us anymore. How about going on a trip, just the 2 of us like old times?" "Oh really? When was the last time we went on a trip together?" "You're always helping out around here, and we both work hard, don't we? Indulging a little won't hurt, haha." "Haha, that's true. The girls are old enough to handle things on their own. Should we leave the housework to them?" "Yeah, that's a great idea. I'll need to arrange for some time off work. Where would you like to go to?" "It might be nice to relax at a hot spring resort." "A hot spring resort? Sounds great." He started to plan the trip with a delighted expression on his face. I couldn't help but smile at his boyish enthusiasm. Whenever I had a free moment during work or my commute, I found myself checking out travel websites. The destination for our trip was gradually being narrowed down, and I'd already filled in our daughters about our plans. I was happy that he suggested the trip itself. Fast forward 1 month after our vacation discussions. I was waiting for my husband to get home so we could finalize our travel schedule. Usually, he's home by the time I return from work, but that day was different. When I got home, he was nowhere to be found, and our daughters couldn't provide any clues. His late returns were always preceded by a call, so his absence made me uneasy. If he hadn't called by the next day, I decided to call him. As I was considering my options, he finally arrived home just after 11 p.m. "Welcome home. I was worried since you were late." I rushed over to him, but his face was somber. "What happened? Anything wrong at work?" In response to my inquiry, he opened his mouth slowly. "Natalie, we need to talk." "Talk? What's up? You look so serious." "I've been having an affair." "What?" "I said I've been cheating on you with another woman." I was too shocked to speak properly. "Cheating? My husband?" In my confusion, I managed to stammer out a response. What are you saying? An affair? You wouldn't." "But I have. It's been going on for a year." A year? That's a joke, right? You showed no signs." "I tried my best to keep it from you. Meeting her after work when you were working late, telling you I was working on weekends when I went out." "No, that's a lie. You wouldn't." As if to soothe my distraught, my husband grabbed both my shoulders. Looking straight into my eyes, he opened his mouth again. "I'm really sorry, but there's no turning back now." "What do you mean no going back? Stop kidding around. We've been together for 20 years, haven't we?" "Anyway, that's the situation. I want a divorce for her." "Divorce? For her? What the heck is going on? We were just talking about going on a trip together, weren't we?" "I'm really sorry." I can't comprehend what he's saying. Has my husband been replaced by someone else? Tearfully, I confronted him and he began to explain the situation. According to his story, the woman he was cheating with was a junior at the same company. Moreover, she was a temporary employee, barely 20 years old. She started to work at his company about a year ago, and somehow he became her mentor. After work, he began to tutor her, and they started to have coffee breaks together. After going out for dinner a few times after work, they fell into a romantic relationship. "She's so innocent, cute, and she can't do without me." You've got to be kidding, and she's 27 years younger? He talks about the charm of her. I feel as if I have no charm. Then he dropped a huge bomb. "You remember me saying I want a divorce for her sake? To be honest, she's pregnant." "What? Pregnant?" "Yeah, so I think I should take responsibility and marry her. Luckily, our girls are becoming less dependent." "Hold on a minute, that doesn't matter, right? Those girls are our daughters, you know." "Don't worry, I'll give you the custody." "What?" While we're having such an important conversation, my husband's eyes are gleaming with a calm smile. Does he really think that if he gives up custody, I'll just accept this? I felt like I was being made a fool of, and the sadness that I had been feeling began to turn into anger. Before I knew it, I was yelling louder than I ever had before. Don't be absurd. This is too much.
There's no point in saying that, right? The life that's about to be born is more important to me now.
Why then did you say let's go on a trip as a couple? I was really looking forward to that trip.
I didn't think she was pregnant at the time.
So, if she hadn't gotten pregnant, you would have kept cheating on me in secret, is that it?
Well, anyway, I'm bringing her over tomorrow. Let's talk things over then.
With a quick change of subject, he brought the already filled out divorce papers and rushed to the bathroom. What the hell is going on? He confesses to an affair out of the blue, then says the woman is pregnant? How much more can he mock me? Having prepared dinner for him and waited, I feel like such a fool. I was tormented by my chaotic emotions. However, no matter how much my anger built up, the situation wouldn't change. I decided to confront my husband's affair head on. The next day, as he said, he brought over his mistress. I told our daughters to stay in their rooms and had my husband and his mistress sit on the couch. The woman, who introduced herself as Lisa, bowed to me as soon as she sat down. I am truly sorry for all of this. Your apology doesn't help. My husband and I have 3 daughters. I understand that, but for the sake of our child in my womb, could you please divorce John? What? Why should I have to destroy my family for the sake of your child? At her nonchalant request for divorce, I lost my temper. I raised my voice yelling, "Don't be ridiculous," and she covered her mouth with her hand as if she pretended. Ugh. With that, my husband looked at her with concern.
Hey Lisa, are you okay?
I'm sorry, John, I'm feeling a bit...
Must be morning sickness, right? What do you want to do? Do you need to go to the bathroom?
Thank you. Can you show me the way?
Of course, come this way.
I saw my husband being more gentlemanly than I had ever seen him before. He helped Lisa out, looking a bit hesitant when she returned from the bathroom.
Lisa, take it easy, alright? We've got our precious little baby inside you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. When Natalie yelled at me, I got suddenly scared.
I'm sorry, you're right. If she had agreed to divorce straight away, we wouldn't be in this mess.
No, it's okay. This is a trial we have to overcome in order to be together. They smiled and held hands like a scene straight out of a movie. At that moment, my feelings for my husband froze at a tremendous speed. If you had just agreed to an honest divorce, what, you think it's my fault? It wasn't you who cheated on me in the first place? If this happens, I'll divorce you or whatever. I decided to agree to the divorce because further discussion was getting ridiculous. Shortly thereafter, I removed my husband and his unfaithful partner from the house and locked the door. My daughters emerged from their rooms, probably having heard us. Mom, is what we heard true? I gave a small nod to my eldest daughter's question. I couldn't hide it anymore. I called my daughter to the living room to talk about my husband's affair. So, we're getting a divorce. I want you girls to decide who you want to be with from now on. In response to my words, my daughters all said together, well, obviously we're sticking with Mom. Right? But it's unfair if Dad doesn't get any sort of punishment. Exactly. Let's get back at him and his new mom. Immediately afterwards, my daughter suggested a plan. My children are very clever. I was surprised at what they suggested, but I took them up on it and decided to put on a show. A few days later, I called my husband and told him that I needed to talk to him about alimony. When he came to visit me, I immediately started to talk to him. I'll be asking for a proper alimony payment after the divorce. As for custody, you can have it. At my words, my husband rolled his eyes. Huh? Then our daughters appeared. When he saw them, he opened his mouth as if he is upset.
Hey, you all. Wouldn't you rather live with your mom, huh?
Why? We're obviously going with you, Dad. Who we choose is our business, isn't it? After all, a dad's income is more stable, right?
Hold on. Natalie, your mom earns more in this house.
The daughters nonchalantly brushed off their father's desperate persuasion. It's okay. As long as we get our usual pocket money, we're good. Right? As long as us 3 sisters stick together, that's all that matters. Exactly. In fact, Dad, you should feel honored we're choosing you.
Well, that is...
Although he seems confused, he had no choice but to accept his children's decision. He had always been a pushover when it came to his daughters. My husband reluctantly agreed that he would have custody of the children. Since my husband is the cause of the divorce, there will be no child support payments from me. We decided to divorce, strictly collecting the alimony from him and his mistress. The next day, we submitted the divorce papers to City Hall. The alimony was $30,000 from my husband and $15,000 from his mistress. We received the entire amount at one time. Our daughters would stay at my house on weekends and live with their father and mistress during the rest of the week, though their new home was a small apartment where the mistress had previously lived. Living with 5 people in such a small space must have been quite uncomfortable, but that was all part of the plan. Just wait and see. I'll make sure they regret betraying me and our daughters. 2 months later, just when I was thinking it might be about time, my ex-husband and Lisa barged into my house.
Hey, what the hell is wrong with them?
Dealing with those spoiled brats is impossible. I lost my temper. The two of them, faces red and panting heavily, complained together. In response, I replied calmly, "Could you not be rude? All 3 of them are my pride and joy daughters. They are all good kids."
Don't give me that. What makes them good kids? They're always complaining, "I want an expensive meal," or "I don't get enough allowance," every single day.
Exactly, and why do we have to pay for their tuition and textbooks? No one told us about that.
Well, isn't that a given? After all, you two are their parents. Our home is too small. I've never heard of a family of 5 living in a 1-bedroom apartment.
Yes, that house was originally rented for me to live alone. The neighbors on both sides keep complaining, and even the landlord keeps saying that please move out. Well, that's your own fault. Besides, if the girls say we want dad to have custody, then there's nothing you can do about it.
Ugh.
Both of them were speechless, their expressions bitter. After a long silence, John lowered his head and spoke in a small voice.
Please, take them in.
Huh? What did you just say?
I said take them in. We're about to have a baby. If we keep giving in to the girls' demands, we won't be able to raise our child properly.
Huh? Raising them is also a part of parenting, you know. Stop complaining.
When did you become such a heartless person? You don't understand other people's feelings. You're the worst.
He was livid, face turning red as he yelled. I let out a big sigh and spoke in an inciting tone. Don't understand other people's feelings? You're the worst? Are you talking about yourself?
What?
Who cheated, made a baby with mistress, and said please divorce me for her? Who was the one who betrayed me first and did the worst thing? Do you remember?
That's in the past. Don't bring that up again.
It seems he still doesn't understand how selfish he's being. He's now blaming me, together with his mistress. I didn't hold back and said, enough is enough. It's in the past. Don't just neatly wrap things up on your own. Do you know how the girls and I felt? It's not like we weren't hurt when you betrayed us. Despite all this, you keep being selfish.
But I apologized for the affair, didn't I? Just take them in, please.
Fine, I will. I feel sorry for the girls to stay with such a bitch like you. But in return, make sure you pay child support, alright? You have a responsibility as their father until all of them grow up and become independent adults.
But on my salary alone, I can't possibly.
Shut up! Don't you dare play the victim now. You should have thought of that before you got your mistress pregnant. Now get out of here and never show your face to me again. His face turned pale and he collapsed on the spot. After hanging his head down for a while, he whispered to Lisa, "Let's go home." At that moment, Lisa, who had been silent up to now, gave his cheek a big slap. Don't joke with me. I ended up in debt even after paying alimony, and now you're saying child support? You've got to be kidding. What's the point of lying then?
What's going on, Lisa? What do you mean by lie? Aren't we supposed to raise our child together?
There's no child!
What?
Time stopped for a moment at the unexpected revelation of his mistress. He began to question her.
No child? Then our child is...
The pregnancy was a lie. I just thought you were rich and that's why I wanted to marry you.
What are you talking about, Lisa? That's a lie, right?
The house you were bragging about was actually your wife's, wasn't it? I can't even get a house, be charged for alimony, and be forced to take care of stupid girls? I've had enough. There's nothing good in marrying you. Divorce me right now.
I can't believe this.
My ex-husband clung to Lisa with tears in his eyes. Out of my way. Move. I'm leaving. She pushed him away and left the house. My ex-husband, who was thrown away by his mistress, immediately knelt down on the ground and begged me.
Please forgive me. Give me another chance.
No matter how many times he begged, I, of course, turned him down. I promptly drove him out of the house and called back our daughters at that time. After that, I officially regained custody of our daughters and demanded child support from my ex-husband. The payment of child support for 3 children must have been a heavy burden for him, who had exhausted his savings by paying alimony. Moreover, other employees witnessed the dispute between him and Lisa at work. The news about their relationship spread rapidly. Lisa's contract was terminated, and my ex-husband was relegated to a less important department. His salary was reduced, and with an even tougher life ahead, with nothing left for him, he seemed to be struggling just to make ends meet each month. Now he reportedly can't even afford proper meals and appears to have become quite snobbish. When I told the story to our daughters, they high-fived each other with broad smiles. The daughter strategy was a great success, and the 4 of us celebrated. From now on, a life of 4 women begins. Even without a father, I want to take responsibility as a parent and raise my daughters to be fine adults.
A massive home renovation for elder care? $30,000? What are you talking about? Huh? That's my wife's parents' house, right? A phone call from a man claiming to be my estranged sister-in-law's husband. Considering how the conversation isn't making any sense, it seems like my sister-in-law is up to something. My name is Martha, a 56-year-old stay-at-home wife. I have a son and a daughter, both of whom are adults and have moved out of the house. Now I live with my husband and in-laws, just the four of us. My relationship with my in-laws is good, which I appreciate because I lost my own parents early in life. My husband and I have been enjoying our lives after being freed from child-rearing responsibilities. When we got married, it was understood that we would eventually live with my husband's parents, but my mother-in-law, who had suffered in her relationship with her own mother-in-law, had our house rebuilt into a two-family home for our sake. Even though we live together, we each have our own private space. Maybe that's why our relationship has been so good. During the day, my husband is still working, so I often spend time with my in-laws. That day, as my father-in-law was busy with farm work, I was preparing lunch in the kitchen, planning for us to eat together outside. Then a call came from one of my father-in-law's farming friends, telling us that he had fallen and broken a bone. He had already been taken to the family doctor in a pickup truck. My mother-in-law and I left the food and rushed to the hospital. When we arrived, emergency surgery was underway. My father-in-law seemed healthy, but he was in his 80s and recovering from a fracture would be tough. We were told to be prepared for the worst, like needing a wheelchair. That's what they were talking about. As long as he's alive, that's enough. I will be his legs. We waited anxiously for the surgery to end with prayers in our hearts. By the time my husband finished work and arrived, the surgery was over and the three of us were relieved to see my father-in-law sleeping in his hospital room without any serious complications. We decided to support my father-in-law together from now on, but our prayers were in vain, and my father-in-law passed away suddenly 1 month later. His age had weakened his physical strength and immunity, and he had contracted an infection after the surgery. Many of his friends, relatives, and acquaintances were also elderly, so informing them about the wake and the funeral would only be upsetting to them. The three of us discussed it and decided on a family funeral. However, even a family funeral didn't resolve all the issues. "What about my sister-in-law?" I asked. My mother-in-law and husband both made visibly unapproving faces, probably recalling my sister-in-law's marriage turmoil. My in-laws had strongly opposed her marriage. My husband wasn't as opposed as them, but he couldn't purely be happy about it either. As a result, their relationship became strained and distant. Still, she was their biological daughter. Wouldn't it be okay for her to be present at the final farewell? They agreed that if we could get in touch with her, it would be fine. But we couldn't reach her at the contact information we had, and the funeral proceeded without her. It's just how things are with her. It's fate. Don't worry about it, Martha. On our way back from the crematorium to the house with my father-in-law's ashes, my mother-in-law gently patted my shoulder and reassured me. My father-in-law's sudden passing took us all by surprise. Without any mental preparation, we hurriedly went through the funeral and cremation. We clasped our hands over my father-in-law's ashes, lit incense, and spent the following days in a state of listlessness. It's more bearable when my husband is around. We can talk to each other. But when my husband goes to work, I can't stand being alone in the quiet room. So I head to my mother-in-law's room. I know she is feeling even more pain and sadness than I am. After all, she suddenly lost the husband she had been with for so many years. Even if it is just a facade, I try to be cheerful around her. However, my mother-in-law was much more accepting of reality than I thought. I was planning to stay like this until the 49th day, but... Yes, we can sort through his belongings later. But you know, I'm already over 80. You look so young for your 80, mother-in-law. Not having been sick often, she would say that the only time she was hospitalized was for childbirth. In other words, she was directly telling us that she's healthy enough for us not to worry about her. You're so kind, Martha. But while I can still move around, I'd like to sort through my things, including his. I understand the feeling of not wanting someone else to go through the important memories, like my father-in-law's belongings. Understood. Just let me know if you need any help. With that, she immediately asked me to help her take down items that were too high for her to reach. As we pulled out old photos of my father-in-law, my mother-in-law happily reminisced about their younger days, sharing stories about their travels and adventures. I listened intently, nodding along, when the phone rang. My mother-in-law doesn't have a smartphone, so the landline is her main means of communication. I wonder who that is. There were only a handful of people who would call, and they were all close friends who knew our situation. I thought they would avoid calling if they knew, but it might be an emergency. I'll answer it. It was better for me to move rather than make my mother-in-law, who had been talking about how sitting and standing were becoming difficult, get up. I quickly picked up the receiver near the entrance, and a man's voice I didn't recognize greeted me. He introduced himself as my sister-in-law's husband, speaking very politely. However, I had never met him before. I didn't know if he really was who he claimed to be. As I listened, wondering if this was some new scam targeting elderly people, he said, "I want to talk to you about the home renovation for caregiving. My father-in-law had already passed away. Why bring up caregiving renovations now? Did he mistake my mother-in-law? No, she wasn't in need of that level of care. Excuse me, but are you sure you have the right house? This is my wife's family home, right?" The man claiming to be my sister-in-law's husband mentioned her maiden name. Indeed, the maiden name matched my husband's family, and there was no mistake that this was their home. Moreover, the name matched my sister-in-law's. It is true that the woman you mention is my husband's sister. Thank goodness. Thank you for believing me. With all the trouble our marriage has caused, I was worried I had made a bad impression again. I don't know the reason why my in-laws so strongly opposed my sister-in-law's marriage. However, I don't get a bad impression from this man at all. On the contrary, he seems very humble and sincere. According to my brother-in-law, he heard that the cost of caregiving renovation would be around $30,000. He wants to do his best to make up for the inconvenience he has caused. He fully intends to pay the $30,000 and is preparing it. However, he just can't get the money ready by the deadline. His call was to ask if we could possibly wait and extend the payment deadline. It's awkward to let him explain everything before saying this, but since he spoke with such passion, I failed to convey the truth. Thank you for your politeness. So, about the extension. Please, wait a moment. When did you hear about the caregiving renovation? My father-in-law was very healthy and was working in agriculture until recently. So the need for caregiving, it didn't exist at all. It didn't? Wait, past tense? Yes, my father-in-law passed away. We just finished his funeral and cremation the other day. I see. Well... I could picture him panicking on the other end of the phone. He must be confused by the difference between what his wife told him and the truth I just shared. It just didn't make sense to him. He slowly told me that he had caused a lot of trouble for my in-laws when they got married. He had heard from his wife that her father needed care, and he intended to provide financial assistance as an apology for the trouble he had caused. He told me all this. Feeling that he was being honest, I asked him how the story of my father-in-law needing care came up. It had come up a few years ago. At first, he seemed to be sending a fixed amount every month as a contribution to caregiving expenses. However, it was clear neither my father-in-law nor mother-in-law had heard of such a thing. If they had known, my mother-in-law would have invited him to the funeral. He said, her mother was grateful and that it helped, so I thought I was slowly being forgiven. If you were being forgiven, wouldn't she talk to you? That's true. Moreover, the amount of money sent each year seemed to be increasing. He had been sending more money every month, assuming we had asked for additional support, something we had no recollection of. So none of that money has reached you. When I agreed, I could picture him getting extremely upset. It was hard for me to convey the information as well. As I was listening, I thought that maybe my sister-in-law, I couldn't quite say you're being scammed, but he said, you don't have to be considerate. I'm being scammed, aren't I? I couldn't say yes or no, so I remained silent. He probably took my silence as affirmation. He asked what he should do, assuming he was being scammed. Although it wasn't my place to answer that question, I just couldn't leave my sister-in-law, my husband's sister, alone, even though we were estranged. I told him we would discuss the matter and contact him later, and that was it for today. When I returned to my mother-in-law, she said, "That was a long call. Was it a pushy salesperson? You should just hang up on those." She seemed to think it was a persistent sales call. No, it was a man claiming to be my sister-in-law's husband. So I relayed the content of the phone call to my mother-in-law. She was trembling with anger even while listening, and her anger exploded even more after hearing everything. What kind of person is she, using her father as an excuse to ask her husband for money? Apparently, my sister-in-law has always been reckless with money. Owning expensive branded items she couldn't afford with her allowance or part-time job earnings, her actions were suspicious. When she wanted to get married, her partner was a man with a considerably high income who had an incomparable amount of pre-existing wealth, which led her parents to strongly oppose the marriage. The opposition wasn't for my sister-in-law's sake, but for her partner. We then decided to wait at the culprit's house with her husband for her to return home. I can't remember the last time I saw my sister-in-law. When she decided to date her then boyfriend with the intention of getting married, she introduced him to her parents and brother. There was a commotion about my sister-in-law's marriage, but since I was not yet related to my in-laws, I did not attend. So this would be my first time meeting my sister-in-law's husband. As I had perceived over the phone, he seemed to be a sincere person with a pleasant demeanor. I had heard he had high income, but he didn't seem to be living lavishly. He seemed to be trying to live a modest life, but if one of the reasons for this was my sister-in-law's lies, it must be a complicated set of emotions. Reuniting with my sister-in-law after several decades, my sister-in-law, who would never have expected her mother to be there at her home, was so surprised that her eyes widened as she stood frozen. The impression of my sister-in-law that I remember was one of someone who liked flashy things, but the sister-in-law in front of me was flashy to the point of being gaudy and lacking any sense of style, which was painful to watch. The three of us had agreed beforehand that we would go along with my sister-in-law's story at first. We decided not to touch upon the fact that she was lying. "It's been a while. I'm glad to see you're doing well." When my sister-in-law was suddenly spoken to with kind words, She stammered while responding to her mother. She probably thought her lies had been exposed and she was going to be yelled at, but she seemed confused by the unexpected kindness. "I wanted to see your face after all this time. Have you been doing well?" We didn't tell her the truth about her father's passing and maintained the pretense that he was still alive. I also apologized for not having been in touch and gave a suitable greeting. My sister-in-law said humbly that she was glad her mother seemed well and that she had been worried about her. However, she did not mention her father. It would be terrible if the conversation turned to her father and the topic of caregiving expenses slipped out of my husband's mouth. It seemed that my husband and she had met beforehand, but apparently her lies had not been exposed. She probably thought she could get away with it and not get caught. "Your mom is happy. It seems that you two are getting along well as a couple." My mother-in-law said she was happy to have a good daughter and hoped that my sister-in-law would have a change of heart and start repaying her husband little by little. The plan was to shower her with praise in the hope of changing her ways. Somehow, my sister-in-law got carried away and told my mother-in-law that she would support her if she ever needed caregiving, and even went so far as to say not to worry about money. It's amazing she could say such things in front of her husband who had been supporting her out of good intentions. I felt so sorry for her husband listening to all this. We conveyed our gratitude and left that day. From her behavior, it seemed likely that my sister-in-law had been using the money she asked for herself. Not knowing what she'd spent the sudden, large sum of $30,000 on, we decided to have a private investigator look into her finances. The monthly caregiving funds of several $1,000s were indeed being used for her own benefit. However, it turned out that she was also heavily involved with a favorite host at a club, supporting him in various ways to make him number one. She'd been spending lavishly, buying expensive bottles and racking up debt she couldn't pay off each month. The host was being strictly pursued for the unpaid bills, which amounted to $30,000. Upon learning this, my sister-in-law's husband was furious and decided he couldn't overlook it any longer. He arranged everything while she was on a trip with her favorite host. Unaware of all this, my sister-in-law returned home after a few days to find her house completely empty, with not a single piece of furniture or personal item left behind. Panicking, she tried to contact her husband but couldn't get through, so she called me. At first, she was hysterical, but when I asked her, "How was your trip with your favorite host?" she immediately quieted down. She couldn't ask how I knew about it, since that would be admitting to her actions. Now it was my turn to reveal everything without giving her any room for rebuttal. "I can't believe you thought you weren't caught and took advantage of the situation. You betrayed your mother, your husband, and I don't think anyone will want to help you anymore." I also told her that the father-in-law she used as an excuse had passed away. It was not her fault for not knowing he had died, but using her father's care as a reason to ask for money was wrong. I informed her that her ex-husband knew the truth as well, and realizing she had been abandoned, she let out a scream like a madwoman over the phone. Her ex-husband didn't want to speak to her, and not wanting to burden my elderly mother-in-law any further, I offered to be the go-between with my sister-in-law. She continued to make a fuss over the phone. In a way, she was a pitiable person, not even knowing her father had passed away and using him as an excuse. She might regret it, but it's too late now. I conveyed one last message to her. "Your ex-husband said he's going to demand full payment for the money you gave to the host. You'll have to figure out how to pay off the $30,000 debt yourself." Later, she received paperwork from a lawyer. She asked to talk to her husband, but he never agreed. He was furious and couldn't stand the thought of his ex-wife even for the sake of legal procedures. Without any compromise, my sister-in-law was forced to live a frugal life while working. Of course, she couldn't afford to splurge at the host club anymore, and her favorite host stopped paying attention to her, leaving her with nothing but the huge debt she had accumulated. Occasionally, intimidating debt collectors would come by. Being naturally timid, my sister-in-law lived in constant fear of the lawyer's notices and the debt collector's visits. As for the three of us, we returned to our normal lives. It still took some time to sort through my father-in-law's belongings, but we decided to live on, including his share, as a family. Lately, my mother-in-law has started showing signs of decline, and I have a feeling the days she'll need caregiving might be close. Since we couldn't do anything for my father-in-law, my husband and I agreed to do our best for my mother-in-law.